I still remember the last Christmas invitation my mother ever sent. Sometimes I wonder if she knew even then that it would be the last. The card was simple, just a picture of holly, the words "Home for the Holidays" written in my mother's neat, looping handwriting. It felt like holding onto a piece of home, even as everything around me was starting to drift. There was a time when those little rituals, the card, the smell of baking spices, the way the first snow would settle on our front steps, made me feel like I belonged, like I was stitched right into the fabric of the Winslow family. But by that December, the warmth of home seemed to hover just out of reach. Salem was always at its prettiest in early winter. Main Street would twinkle with holiday lights, the smell of pine and wood smoke in the air. At Marjorie's Bakery, my mother bustled from counter to oven, humming along with Christmas music on the radio. The bell over the door never stopped ringing. Customers lined up for pecan pies and gingerbread, their cheeks red from the cold, their arms full of gifts and cinnamon rolls. I loved helping her this time of year, even when my own to-do list threatened to overflow. There was comfort in the routine, in the familiar rhythm of mixing dough and tying up bakery boxes with red string. But that year, something felt different, an invisible distance I couldn't quite name. My mother handed me a list as soon as I arrived. "Can you decorate the front window, sweep up behind the counter, and get those new trays from the back room?" There was no question if I wanted to help, just the assumption that I would. I smiled, took the list, told her I'd get right on it. That's how it had always been. Lainey, my younger sister, swirled into the bakery in a rush of laughter, snowflakes still tangled in her hair. My mother's eyes lit up when she saw her. Everett, my father, came out from the kitchen just to hug her. "Did you see the new display, Lainey?" "Your mother worked all morning on it," he said, even though I'd helped set it up myself. Lainey beamed, talking about her job at the community center, her plans for New Year's. The best stories, the attention, seemed to gather around her like a warm blanket. I stood by the register, wrapping up boxes, waiting for a pause to share my own small news about a client I'd landed, a campaign I was proud of. But every time I started, someone would cut in. My voice faded into the clatter of cups and plates. The day blurred by in a rush of errands and decorations. In the middle of it, my phone buzzed, a new message in the family group chat. My mother was assigning everyone their holiday tasks. "Lainey, you're on table settings. Everett, can you pick up the ham?" Then, almost as an afterthought, "Harriet, you'll handle the cooking, the desserts, the drinks, and organizing the games, as usual?" No one waited for me to answer. There was just a thumbs up from Lainey and a smiley from Everett. It was always assumed Harriet would say yes. Harriet would keep things running. I tried to remind myself that this was love in its own way, that being relied upon was its own form of inclusion. But as I looked around the bakery, watching my mother laugh with customers and my sister telling stories by the display case, I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. It was as if I was on the outside of my own family's holiday, looking in through a frosted window. The warmth was real, but it didn't reach me. That evening, after closing time, I stayed behind to clean up. My mother left early, arm in arm with Everett, her laughter echoing out into the snowy street. Lainey ducked out with friends, promising to be back in time for dinner. Alone in the quiet, I began making a batch of spiced cider, an old family recipe, cinnamon sticks and cloves filling the air. I took my time, letting the memories settle around me like a well-worn quilt. I thought about all the Christmases past, the year I broke my wrist ice skating and my mother stayed up all night with me, the year Lainey tried to make cookies and set the oven mid on fire. There was love in those memories, but also an ache, a longing to be seen, not just needed. With the cider simmering, I wandered through the empty house. The living room glowed with strings of colored lights. Stockings hung from the mantel, each with our names stitched in red. Mine was a little more faded than the others. I stood in front of the window, watching the snow fall in thick, quiet flakes. Across the street, I saw Mrs. Crenshaw, our neighbor, hauling in her groceries. She waved when she noticed me, her breath turning to clouds in the cold. "Ready for Christmas, Harriet?" she called. I managed to smile, waving back. "Almost," I said, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Later, as I loaded the dishwasher and wiped down the counter, I heard voices outside. Lainey was talking to one of the neighbors, her laughter carrying through the crisp air. I moved closer to the window and caught the end of their conversation. "Harriet's always busy," Lainey said. "She probably won't even be here this year." There was no malice in her voice, just certainty. Like it was obvious. Like I was already halfway gone. I sat for a while after that, letting the silence settle. There's a certain kind of loneliness that's sharp around the holidays, not just being alone, but feeling alone in a room full of people. I try to shake it off, busying myself with small chores, reminding myself how lucky I was to have family at all. That night, long after the bakery closed and the lights were out, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my mother. "Let me know if you're coming for Christmas. If you're too busy, we'll understand." No pressure, she always said. No guilt. But I could feel the weight of it anyway. I stared at the message, unsure how to answer. Unsure if I was still wanted or if I was just expected. I poured myself a cup of the cider I'd made, sitting at the old kitchen table alone. The flavors were the same as always, warm, comforting, sweet. But for the first time, I wondered what it would be like to make Christmas for myself, not just for everyone else. I watched the snow falling outside, the world muffled and still. Somewhere deep inside, something was changing. I didn't know it yet, but this would be the last invitation that felt like home. In my family, help isn't something you ask for, it's just assumed, especially when it comes to me. I learned early on that there's a difference between being needed and being wanted. Sometimes, I wonder if my place in the Winslow family was earned with every check I wrote, every problem I quietly fixed behind the scenes. The bakery was buzzing that morning, the holiday rush in full swing. As I stacked boxes and poured coffee for customers, I heard the soft jingle of coins dropping into the donation jar by the register. "For the animal shelter," my mother said, beaming at a little boy who pressed in a few quarters. But the sound made me think of other kinds of withdrawals, the ones no one ever saw, the ones that came straight out of my savings and into someone else's future. Between batches of muffins, I scrolled through old texts from Lainey. "Hey, H, rent's due. Can you spot me until Friday? College application fees just went up. Any chance you could help?" Each message felt small on its own, but they added up: tuition here, a security deposit there, new tires, a deposit on her first apartment. I didn't mind, not really. She was my little sister, and it was just what I did. And every time I said yes, the reply was always the same, a flurry of heart emojis and a selfie with Lainey's thumb up, bright and grateful. Still, I couldn't help but notice, she never tagged me in those Instagram posts celebrating her latest milestone. One afternoon, I got a call at work from Craig Lambert, the manager at the dealership. "Hi Harriet, just following up. We've got everything set for the co-signature on the Civic. If you could swing by this week, we'll finalize it." I hesitated. "Co-signature?" "I thought it was just paperwork," Lainey said. Craig chuckled, as if he heard this sort of thing all the time. "She's approved, but you're listed as the primary." "No worries, family helps family, right?" I swallowed, feeling the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. "Right. I'll be there." That evening, I brought it up at the bakery. My mother was kneading dough, flour dusted across her apron. "Mom, about the car, am I really the main signer?" She didn't look up. "You're always so dependable, Harriet. You know how to keep things in order." Your father and I tried, but the bank said you have the strongest credit. We're all in this together, aren't we? I nodded, but I didn't feel like part of a team. More like the safety net that no one else even saw. Later, as I walked home through the cold, I checked my phone. Lainey's latest post popped up. New car, new adventures. Couldn't have done it without my amazing family. The photo was all smiles, her, Marjorie, Everett, and the shiny red Civic. No mention of me, though my name was on every piece of paper that made that photo possible. It stung more than I wanted to admit. My apartment was warm and small, filled with the comforting clutter of someone who spends more time out than in. I collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through digital group chats. Lainey, who's bringing the cranberry sauce? Marjorie, Harriet, can you coordinate the dinner? And maybe help Lainey get her car registered. No one asked if I had time. They just expected I'd say yes. I pulled out the folder from the dealership, every document signed and initialed. There it was in bold. Primary borrower, Harriet Winslow. Secondary, Lainey Winslow. It wasn't just Lainey's car, it was my credit, my responsibility. If something went wrong, the bill would find me first. I sat there a long while, letting the reality sink in. I thought of all the times I'd quietly bailed someone out, smoothed over a crisis, covered a gap. I thought of the way my family celebrated every good thing as a team effort, but every burden seemed to land in my lap alone. That night, as I was winding down, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. Sweetheart, could you help out just one more time this year? Christmas is coming and things are tight. I know we can count on you. No details, no specifics, just the old, familiar assumption that I'd always say yes. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the lights of Salem twinkle in the darkness. On a whim, I opened my old emails and found one from Joan Kimball, an old friend from college who'd become something of a mentor over the years. She'd written months ago, "You can love your family and still have boundaries. Love isn't measured by what you sacrifice. Take care of you, too." Back then, I'd nodded along and hit reply with a polite thank you. Now, the words felt different, heavier, sharper, true. I turned off my phone, setting it face down on the table. For the first time, I wondered what might happen if I just didn't answer. If I let the request hang in the air unfulfilled. The thought made my heart race, not with fear, but with a strange sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start asking what I needed, too. I always thought boundaries were for strangers, not for family. Growing up, I believed that love meant giving until it hurt and then giving a little more. But that winter, after years of quietly holding things together, I found myself wondering what would happen if I drew a line and actually kept it. Could I say no, even to my own family? It started with a single text message, typed and retyped until my fingers shook. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, a mug of cocoa steaming beside my laptop, the soft glow of the Christmas lights flickering in the window. Outside, carolers wandered Salem's sidewalks, their voices floating up like a memory from a happier time. Inside, it was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the steady thud of my heart as I finally hit send in the family group chat. I can't host Christmas this year. Work's overwhelming, and I need to take care of myself. I also won't be able to contribute financially this time. I hope you understand. The silence was immediate and absolute. A few red receipts popped up, Lainey, Everett, even my cousin Russell, but no one replied. The chat, usually a flurry of last-minute plans and cheerful memes, was as still as a winter pond. I stared at the screen, half hoping for an avalanche of supportive messages, half expecting the guilt to come crashing down. It didn't take long. My phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering, knowing what was coming. Marjorie's voice was colder than the December air outside. "You know how much Christmas means to this family, Harriet. We all have things going on, but you always make it work." Why now? I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm just tired, Mom. I need a break this year. I can't keep doing it all. She sighed, the kind of heavy sigh that says more than words ever could. Well, I suppose we'll manage without you. There it was, the old wound reopened, sharp and raw. I'd drawn a line, and instead of understanding, I felt it harden into a wall between us. Lainey, ever the star of her own show, posted a selfie that night, her and a group of friends at a holiday party, captioned #RealFamily. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. The message was clear enough. If I wasn't giving, I wasn't included. A few days later, for the first time in my adult life, I received the family's Christmas shopping spreadsheet, and for once, there was nothing next to my name. No list of groceries to pick up, no desserts to bake, no last-minute errands. I stared at the blank space, feeling a mix of relief and loss. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? To not be the default helper, the one everyone counted on? Still, the emptiness felt colder than I expected. That night, as snow drifted softly against the window, I reread an old email from Joan, saying no isn't selfish, it's self-care. Back then, it sounded like advice for other people with simpler families, maybe, or stronger spines. Now, it echoed in my mind like a new kind of carol. I lingered in my kitchen, stirring another mug of cocoa, listening to the distant sound of carolers outside. Their voices were warm and full, winding through the night as if searching for somewhere to land. My apartment felt quieter than ever, no bustling plans, no deadlines, no one depending on me for holiday magic. Just me, a kitchen full of silence, and a heart that was aching and grateful all at once. Later, as I scrolled through my messages, a private text popped up from Russell. You still coming, cuz? It'll be weird without you. His words surprised me. They cut through the quiet, a gentle reminder that not every tie was measured by what I could give. I typed back, not sure yet, but thanks for asking. He replied with a simple thumbs up, and for the first time all week I smiled. The world outside kept spinning, Christmas music drifting in from the street, neighbors laughing as they carried trees up the stairs. Salem glowed with that small-town magic, but in my little corner, everything was still. For once, I wasn't running on empty for someone else's holiday. I was just sitting with myself, uncertain, a little sad, but quietly proud. Boundaries, it turns out, are the first real gift you ever give yourself. There are silences colder than the thickest snow, and that winter, it felt like quiet pressed in on me from every side. Salem was blanketed in white, the kind that muffled even the sound of traffic and left the sidewalks slick and still. It was the sort of weather that once meant togetherness, bundling up, singing carols, holding mugs of cider as laughter filled every room. This year, it meant being left with my own echo. I wrapped myself in a scarf and set out on foot, letting the crunch of snow under my boots anchor me to the world outside my apartment. Every house was lit up for the holidays, garlands strung between porch rails, plastic reindeer glowing in the yards. Somewhere in the distance, a child's voice shouted, "Merry Christmas," and I almost called back, out of habit. Instead, I tucked my hands deeper in my pockets and kept walking. Main Street was quieter than usual. The town's secret Santa board stood outside the hardware store, its green poster curling at the corners. Most years, my name was written in red marker, usually with 3 exclamation points and a little heart. Harriet always gets the fun gifts, someone would say. This year, my name was missing. I paused in front of the list, reading all the familiar names: Joan Kimball, Mrs. Crenshaw, the Carmichael twins, but not mine. I felt a prick of something between embarrassment and relief. It's strange how you can miss something you used to take for granted. Passing the bakery, I saw the windows were steamed up from all the baking inside. Warm yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk, and silhouettes moved briskly back and forth, Marjorie and Lainey, their gestures big and animated. I used to be part of that scene, bustling around the kitchen, humming along with the radio, dusted in flour and sugar. Now I was just a passerby, standing in the cold and watching my own family through glass. They looked busy, happy even. I wondered if they noticed I was gone. "Harriet," a voice called. I turned to see Mrs. Crenshaw, bundled in a bright red coat, struggling with a bag of groceries. "What are you doing out here?" "I thought you'd be in there helping your mother." I forced a smile. "Just getting some fresh air. Not as busy at the bakery this year." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Well, everyone deserves a break." Her gaze softened. "If you get lonely, you know where to find me. My door's always open for cocoa and stories." I thanked her, feeling a swell of gratitude for the simple kindness. The rest of the walk was quieter. Streetlights blinked on, halos of light softening the night. I paused by the river, watching the snow collect on the old stone bridge. Once, I would have stopped to take a photo, sent it to Lainey, or posted it to the family chat. Now, I just stood there, letting the quiet soak in. Back at my apartment, I shook off the cold and set to baking gingerbread, more out of habit than hunger. I turned on my old radio, the one with a loose dial that crackled every few minutes. Christmas songs floated through the kitchen, soft and familiar, bittersweet. I sang along, just under my breath, filling the empty space with a tune only I could hear. The cinnamon and ginger warmed the air, but the rooms felt vast, almost echoing. Halfway through icing the cookies, I found myself humming louder, pretending I was back in the bakery, surrounded by family and customers and chaos. But there was no one to laugh when I spilled flour or to taste the first, slightly burnt batch. I leaned against the counter, looking around at the cozy clutter of my own space. This was my home now. Quiet, safe, and lonely in a way I hadn't expected. Rummaging in a drawer for extra parchment paper, I stumbled on an old Christmas card from my mother. The handwriting was familiar, looping, and careful. "Home is where you're always welcome." The irony wasn't lost on me. I traced my finger over the words, feeling the sharp edge of that promise. Had it ever really been true? Or had I only believed it because I needed to? Suddenly, a sharp knock sounded at my door. It startled me. No one ever visited without warning. Heart thumping, I wiped my hands and hurried to open it. No one stood outside. Instead, lying neatly on the doormat was a thick FedEx envelope, the kind that always seemed to bring more trouble than joy. I bent down, feeling the cold air rush over my bare feet, and picked it up. The return address was familiar, my parents' street. The weight of it in my hand felt ominous, like holding a secret I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than ever. The radio crackled and popped. The smell of cinnamon clung to the air. I clutched the envelope, staring at it under the kitchen light, suddenly aware of how alone I was, not just tonight, not just this Christmas, but in a quieter, deeper way that settled over me like a fresh blanket of snow. Outside, the sounds of Salem drifted up, a car passing, distant laughter, the fading notes of a carol. I pressed my hand to the window, the glass cold against my palm, and let myself feel the ache of it all. Winter had never felt so silent. By now, I'd grown used to the silence. I thought I was prepared for whatever came next, the holidays without family, the muted ache of being left out, the echo of my own footsteps in a quiet apartment. But nothing really prepares you for the sharp slap of a thick, official envelope landing in the middle of your winter, like a stone dropped into still water. That morning, Salem was glazed in frost. I made coffee and watched a thin ribbon of steam curl upward, the only movement in my kitchen. As I reached for my phone, a ping sounded, a reminder, car payment due. For a second, I almost laughed. Even my devices knew the rhythm of my obligations. I dismissed the alert and headed to the door to grab the paper, but something else caught my eye: a white, heavy FedEx envelope, rigid and crisp, sitting right on my welcome mat. My heart stuttered. Maybe, I thought wildly, it was a peace offering. Maybe my parents sent a card or an apology or even an invitation, a way back in from the cold. I picked it up with hands that shook, feeling the familiar return address: Marjorie and Everett Winslow, in my mother's careful block print. A lump grew in my throat, hope wrestling with dread. The envelope felt too heavy to be just a letter. Inside, there was no card. No photo of the family, no scrawled signature wishing me warmth and light. Just a single sheet of thick paper, an invoice. I blinked, then read again. Amount due, $25,000. Description: 2023 Honda Civic, gift to Lainey Winslow, as per family agreement. Please remit payment in full before year's end. At the bottom, the signatures of my mother and father. No, dear Harriet. No apology. No explanation. I stared at the page, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something I could understand. Gift to Lainey, I never agreed to that. I'd co-signed, yes, but it was meant to be temporary, just until things were settled. I'd never said it was a present. If anything, I'd been reassured, again and again, that this was just a way to help her get started. I held onto the counter to steady myself, the old tile cold beneath my palm. A memory rushed in from a Christmas years ago, me and Lainey laughing as we built gingerbread houses, my mother promising that in this family, we help each other. Back then, I thought that meant we took turns holding each other up. Now, it seemed, I was just the one expected to pay. The invoice didn't stop there. Beneath the amount, in my mother's handwriting, was a note. As agreed, this is your gift to your sister. Thank you for always putting family first. The words felt like a punch. I read them again, but the meaning didn't soften. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration, a record, signed and sealed, that I'd been reclassified from family to sponsor. For a long time, I just stood there. The world outside my window glimmered with anticipation. Neighbors shoveling walks, children trailing tinsel through the halls, the smell of fir trees and baking bread drifting in from the street. Everyone preparing for Christmas, gathering their loved ones close. I held the paper tighter, feeling its weight press into my skin. I couldn't stop my mind from circling back over every conversation, every promise, every "don't worry, we'll pay you back." I'd been careful. I'd saved every text, every email. But none of it seemed to matter now. My parents had made their decision and written it in black and white. In a daze, I checked my phone. Lainey's latest post appeared at the top of my feed, a selfie of her in the new car, grinning into the camera, a scarf wound around her neck. The caption stung, "Some gifts you never forget." She tagged my parents, the dealership, and even the family dog. I wasn't mentioned. I sat at my kitchen table, the invoice spread before me, unable to move. My coffee had gone cold. Outside, the city kept on spinning, lights twinkling, the scent of cinnamon in the air, the world rushing forward without me. I felt numb, suspended in a bubble that no one else could see. What cut deepest wasn't the money. It was the message beneath the numbers, the quiet, undeniable statement that I wasn't a daughter or a sister, not in the ways that mattered. I was a line on a ledger, a resource to be managed. There would be no invitation this year, no seat saved at the table, only an envelope and a bill. For a while, I just watched the shadows lengthen on the walls, listening to the quiet pop of the radiator, the distant noise of people living their lives outside. I wondered how many other families had drawn lines like this, sharp and final, hidden behind the soft glow of holiday decorations. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I let the silence settle, sharper than the cold, and stared at the invoice as if I could will it to disappear. The world was getting ready to celebrate, to come together. I was left holding proof that I'd already been left behind. If this is the price of family, I'm not sure I want to belong anymore. That thought ran circles in my mind as I sat at my kitchen table, the $25,000 invoice staring back at me, sharp and cold as any winter wind. The world outside my window was still, blanketed in snow, as if Salem itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. For a long time, I just sat, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. The invoice, with its crisp black lettering and official stamps, looked so final. But I kept thinking back, turning the clock to those first days at the dealership with Lainey. I'd read the loan contract carefully, eyes skimming over the fine print, wanting to make sure everything was above board. Back then, it seemed like a formality. I thought I was being responsible, just helping my sister get started. Now I realized how little anyone else had paid attention. I opened my laptop, heart thumping in my chest. I pulled up the digital folder where I kept all my important documents, taxes, contracts, even scanned copies of holiday recipes. There, sandwiched between a birth certificate and last year's Christmas card, was the loan agreement for Lainey's car. I clicked it open, scrolling through the endless paragraphs of legalese. My name, Harriet Winslow, primary borrower. Lainey's, secondary. It struck me all over again. This wasn't a gift. This was my credit, my name, my future on the line. My parents could send as many invoices as they liked, but they couldn't rewrite the terms of a contract. On impulse, I started typing an email to Abigail Kent, an old college friend who'd become a sharp, thoughtful attorney. The subject line was embarrassingly blunt: car loan help urgent. Within minutes, she wrote back, "Harriet, as long as you're listed as primary, you have the legal right to control the asset. Don't panic. You're not powerless." I stared at the words, a little of the ice in my chest melting. For the first time in days, I felt the ground under my feet. Just to be sure, I called Craig Lambert at the dealership. He answered with his usual chipper voice. "Craig, it's Harriet Winslow. I need to confirm something about my sister's car. The loan, my name is still on it as primary, right?" There was a pause as he pulled up the file. "Yes, ma'am. You're the primary account holder. We can't release the title or change ownership without your approval. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. "Not really, but thank you for confirming." I set the phone down, staring at my reflection in the dark window. Outside, the snow fell harder, thick flakes swirling under the streetlights. My mind raced through the options: pay the invoice and walk away, just to keep the peace. Let them take everything and cut my losses. Or stand up for myself, maybe for the first time. That last option felt foreign, but Joan's voice echoed in my head. You can love your family and still protect yourself. You're not selfish for wanting respect. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a new, quiet resolve rising inside me. I picked up my phone and dialed Abigail's number. "Abigail, it's me," I said when she answered. "I'm ready to move forward. I don't want to be taken advantage of anymore. If there's something I can do to recover the car or my credit or both, let's do it." Her voice was warm, professional. "I'm proud of you, Harriet. I'll draft a motion for recovery tonight and file first thing in the morning. We'll get this straightened out. In the meantime, don't answer any more demands for payment. You're within your rights." I exhaled, feeling a tiny spark of power ignite somewhere deep in my chest. I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting the sounds of Salem's winter night settle around me. The faint scrape of a shovel on concrete, the distant jingle of a neighbor's dog collar, the radiator humming as it battled the cold. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. Maybe there would be arguments, maybe a bigger rift. But for once, I wasn't going to disappear for someone else's comfort. I was done shrinking to fit their story. A new email from Abigail pinged onto my screen. I'll submit the repossession paperwork first thing tomorrow. You did the right thing. I stared at the message, my hands still trembling, but this time, it was with purpose. Not all change comes with fanfare or applause. Sometimes it's as quiet as a snowy street at midnight, as subtle as the shift inside when you decide you matter too. I glanced down at the invoice one last time, then slid it into a folder marked Keep. I wasn't going to let their story define me. This winter, I was drawing my own boundaries loud, clear, and strong enough to last. No one expects the family car to vanish right before Christmas dinner. But sometimes, the unthinkable happens in broad daylight, as quietly as the first snow settling on the drive. All the years I spent smoothing over family drama, keeping the peace this time, the storm was mine to unleash, and I felt both terrified and unshakably steady. The morning was bone cold, breath visible in the air, the world outside so still you could almost hear the frost forming on the mailbox. I sat by my window, coffee in hand, eyes tracing the horizon. My phone vibrated. We're on our way, Craig's text read. My heart pounded, but not with regret. Down on the Winslow driveway, 2 men from the repo company arrived in a nondescript pickup, a flatbed trailer rumbling softly behind. They moved with an efficiency that bordered on surgical. Clipboard, a few checks, keys, a quiet conversation with Craig. Lainey must have seen the truck from her bedroom window. Her scream split the air like a firecracker. Seconds later, she was outside, slippers on the wrong feet, clutching her phone, already live on Instagram. She sobbed for the camera, mascara streaking, voice rising. They're taking my car. My own sister did this to me. I can't believe it. She ruined Christmas. She spun the camera to catch every neighbor within range, hoping for a sympathetic audience. Instead, what she got was a circle of silence, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, their faces unreadable. Inside the bakery, Marjorie must have heard the commotion. She burst out the back door, apron askew, yelling my name down the street as if she could summon me by force of will alone. Everett followed, red-faced, hands stuffed into his coat. I let the phone ring once, twice, then answered. Harriet. What in the world is happening? Mom's voice was raw with fury. You know exactly what's happening, I said, steady. The payment stopped. The car is legally mine. I'm exercising my right. This is family business, Dad snapped, voice close to breaking. We could have worked something out. Like what? Another invoice. My voice didn't waver. I'm done being the family's silent backup plan. From now on, the right person pays their own debts. There was a long silence. I heard Marjorie's breathing, short and sharp, as if she was about to say something unforgivable and stopped herself. Dad was the first to break. We just want things back to normal. I closed my eyes, feeling the truth of it settle in. Normal means me carrying everyone else's weight. I can't do that anymore. Out on Main Street, the repo truck's lights flickered once and the Civic rolled up the ramp, metal on metal. Craig gave a quick wave to Russell, my cousin, who was watching from across the street, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes wide and uncertain. He caught my gaze as the car disappeared around the corner. He didn't wave, just nodded, a tiny sign that someone understood. My phone chimed with a new message, Abigail, my lawyer, efficient as ever, done. Car is repossessed. Would you like me to arrange the sale? Before I could reply, I glanced at my notifications. Lainey was still streaming, face blotchy, sniffling for an audience that wasn't sure how to react. The comments flashed by, some sympathetic, others not. Maybe you should have paid your sister back, one said. Another, family is about respect, too. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it faded quickly beneath the steady warmth of relief. The contrast between her online chaos and the calm of my own morning was staggering. I turned off my phone and set it aside. The house was silent, save for the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of distant bells from the church downtown. I moved through my space with a sense of lightness, a slow, deep breath filling my chest. The drama belonged elsewhere now. Later, Mrs. Crenshaw stopped me as I checked my mail. "Everything all right, Harriet?" she asked, her gaze gentle but curious. I shrugged, offering a small, real smile. "I'm okay, actually. For the first time in a while." She nodded, as if she already knew. Christmas lights glimmered in every window, but for once, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. The balance had shifted. I'd claimed something for myself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The price was heavy, but it was mine to pay. As I sat down that night, Abigail's message still open on my laptop, I typed, "Yes, please arrange the sale." For the first time, the winter felt less like exile and more like a quiet clearing, a space where something new could take root. The repo truck was gone. The arguments faded into the hush of Salem's snowy night. I wasn't the villain of anyone's story, not really. I was just someone learning, finally, how to draw a line and hold it. I always thought if I ever finally stood up for myself, I'd feel victorious, righteous, maybe, or at least vindicated. But the morning after the dust settled, the feeling that washed over me wasn't victory. It was freedom. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet and real, like the first clean breath of cold air after a snowstorm. The car was gone, the paperwork finished, my ties to the debt cut as neatly as the string on a gift box. Abigail handled the sale, efficient, matter-of-fact, a true friend even when we hardly spoke outside of emails these days. The payment hit my account and, almost as soon as it arrived, I sent a portion of it away again, not to my family, but to the Salem Women's Shelter, a place I'd read about for years, but never thought to help. It felt right. Better than right, actually. It felt like the kind of gift you give not because someone expects it, but because you finally have a choice. Walking out of the bank, receipt in hand, the city felt changed. Not because Salem had changed, but because I had. The snow was thicker than ever, but the air was bright, and for once the chill didn't bother me. I let my boots crunch along the sidewalk, the world moving at its own slow winter pace. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix something for someone else. I had nowhere to be except here. My phone buzzed. Russell's name lit up the screen. Not everybody has the guts to stand up for themselves. Proud of you, Har. I smiled, warm for a moment in a way that had nothing to do with scarves or gloves. Thanks, Russ. It took me long enough, I typed back. Back home, the apartment was peaceful. Afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, painting the table gold. I was dusting off an old teapot when someone knocked at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Crenshaw, cheeks rosy from the cold, holding a tin of homemade cookies. "Thought you could use a treat," she said, her eyes kind. I let her in, poured tea, and we sat together in gentle silence, each sipping, looking out at the snow. We didn't talk about the car or my family or any of the drama. She just sat with me, letting me have my quiet, and I was more grateful for that than any advice. After she left, I bundled up and went for a walk. The park was all powdery white, every branch iced, every path edged with the blue shadows of late afternoon. Kids built snowmen under the pines, someone's dog chased crows across the frozen grass. I let myself breathe, filling my lungs with cold, clean air. For so long, I'd carried a knot of resentment, a stubborn ache, the sense that I was always responsible, always left holding the mess. Now, with every step, that weight grew lighter. I stopped beneath a street lamp, the world bathed in soft orange glow. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, It was restful, forgiving. For the first time, I could see the beauty in the emptiness, space to rest, to dream, to finally be just myself. No more lists, no more duties, no more debts. At home that evening, I sat down at my laptop and booked a small mountain cabin I'd found online. Nothing fancy, just wood walls, a fireplace, and quiet. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. For once, my time belonged to me. I was ready to welcome the new year on my own terms, in a place where I could breathe, heal, and start over. That night, Salem was hushed under new snow. I stood outside, letting the cold prickle my cheeks, watching my breath rise in little clouds. I looked up at the dark branches against the moonlit sky and felt a peace I'd never known growing up, the sense that maybe I was enough, just as I was. I didn't need to fix anyone or hold everything together. I could simply stand still, silent, and free. And that, I realized, was the real gift I'd been searching for all along. Sometimes, to rediscover who you are, you have to step outside everything familiar. I'd read that somewhere in a paperback novel as a girl, and for years, it sounded like something meant for other people. People without roots, people who didn't have a family counting on them to keep the seams stitched tight. Now, as I navigated the winding road out of Salem, past frozen fields and stands of winter bare trees, it finally made sense. I was leaving not just a place, but a part of myself that needed to rest. The cabin was smaller than I'd expected, just a patch of honey-colored wood perched on the edge of the forest, with a deep porch and a roof bowed beneath a quilt of snow. Bill, the owner, greeted me with a nod and a thermos of coffee. "It's basic, but it's solid," he said. "Woodstove's temperamental, but she keeps the cold out. Holler if you need anything." He left me to it, and for a moment I just stood there, suitcase in hand, letting the hush of the pines and the distant call of a jay wash over me. Inside, I unpacked slowly: warm socks, flannel shirts, a battered copy of Little Women, and the recipe for blueberry muffins I'd found tucked in an old cookbook from home. I swept the wood stove, stacked logs, and watched flames blossom and dance. The rituals were simple, grounding. I let my mind drift, feeling the ache of old habits, the reflex to check my phone, the urge to scroll for updates from a family that, for once, didn't need me. Evenings fell early in the mountains. I'd stir a pot of hearty soup on the stove, then settle into the old armchair with a book and a blanket. The only sounds were the pop of the fire, the wind rattling icicles on the porch, and sometimes the gentle shuffle of Bill in the next cabin over. I saw him rarely, but when we did cross paths, he'd nod or offer a wry smile. It was enough. On Christmas Eve, I traded a few honest, late-night emails with Joan, my old mentor, still somehow my wisest friend. I wrote her everything: the relief, the pain, the strange sense of loss that followed freedom. She replied, "Change always stings. But don't mistake emptiness for failure. Sometimes space is what lets you grow." Her words settled into me like embers, quietly burning. I took walks through the woods every day, letting my boots sink into the fresh powder, letting my mind wander. Some days, I felt the weight of what I'd left behind, the memories, the obligations, the old, tight circle of what it meant to be a Winslow. Other days, I just breathed and felt the possibility in the open air. Alone didn't feel empty here. It felt wide and, strangely, like a beginning. I'd never spent Christmas away from family before. I thought it would break me, that the loneliness would be unbearable. But as I sat by the fire that night, writing in my journal, I realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't even sad, not really. I wrote about my parents, about Lainey, about Salem, and all the years I'd poured myself out for others. I wrote about forgiveness and about letting go. The logs crackled, and I let myself be present. No expectations, no one to please, nothing to perform but honesty. In the morning, sunlight poured through frosted windows. My phone buzzed, several missed calls from my mother, and one message, "Please call me." I stared at it, heart uncertain. There was no anger, only a quiet curiosity. For the first time, I realized I could decide when or if I wanted to respond. I set the phone aside. Later, I pulled out the muffin recipe and set to work. The scent of baking blueberries filled the tiny cabin, tangy and sweet, a little taste of home without the ache. I made extra and, on a whim, took a few over to Bill's cabin. He answered the door, face softening when he saw the treats. "Sometimes the best company is your own," he said, accepting the plate. I smiled. I'm starting to believe that. That afternoon, I sat out on the porch, hands wrapped around a mug, watching sunlight glitter on the untouched snow. The world felt clear and honest, stripped of the old stories and roles that once defined me. Here, I could be anything, no longer the fixer, the bank, the one everyone counted on, but simply Harriet. Just myself. For years, I'd dreamed of a Christmas alone in the woods, with only my thoughts and a good book. Now, I was living it and discovering that, far from lonely, it was quietly, powerfully enough. For the first time, the silence was mine by choice. Not imposed by others, not the chilly hush of exclusion or the weight of disappointment, but a quiet I'd created, a wall between myself and the constant, anxious noise of my family's demands. I'd spent so many Christmases hoping for acceptance, waiting for an approving nod, a warm word, a sign that I'd done enough. This year, I let my heart do the listening instead. The old cabin's kitchen was filled with the rich aroma of coffee and wood smoke. Morning light filtered through the small window above the sink, catching motes of dust and making them dance. My phone sat on the windowsill, screen aglow with notifications. I knew what waited: voicemails, texts, missed calls piling up like drifted snow. I put it off for hours, letting myself savor the crackle of the fire, the taste of blueberry muffins, the quiet rhythm of my own company. But eventually, curiosity tugged at me. I scrolled through the messages, each one carrying a piece of the past that I was slowly, gently letting go. Marjorie's voicemails came first. At the start, her voice was sharp, brittle. "Harriet, I don't know why you're doing this. We are family. You're making things so difficult." Later, the edge softened, replaced by a quaver I almost didn't recognize. "I just want to talk. Please, can't we make this right? It's Christmas, honey. Families forgive." By the third message, she sounded tired, small. "If you get this, please call home. Your father and I, we miss you." Lainey's texts pinged in next. "No apology, just hurt and accusation. You didn't have to do this. Please don't make it worse for me." Her words were short, sharp, stripped of all the affection she used to save for her followers. Dad's message was quieter, just a few words: "We miss you. The house isn't the same. Take care of yourself, Harriet." It was more than he usually said, and it landed somewhere between comfort and regret. I felt my old reflexes stirring, the urge to fix, to smooth over, to rush in and patch things up before anyone could truly feel pain. For years, I'd made that my job. This time, I didn't move. Instead, I opened a new message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wrote and rewrote, pouring out every truth I'd been carrying. The years I'd tried, the weight of expectations, the way being left out had finally forced me to choose myself. I thanked them for the love they had given me, such as it was, and told them, gently, that I couldn't keep carrying everything alone. But when I finished, I didn't send it. I sat with the words for a while, feeling their shape, their honesty. And then I closed the draft, choosing not to share it, choosing my own peace over one more argument, one more plea. Maybe there would be a time to explain, maybe not. Right now, silence was the truest answer I could give. Outside, the snow was falling again, thick and silent, covering the world in a hush so deep I could almost hear my own heartbeat. I stood at the window, breathing in the crisp air, letting it fill every corner inside me. For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like space to grow, to dream, to just be. A gentle knock broke the silence. I opened the door to find Bill, bundled up, holding a steaming mug. We're sitting by the fire, couple other folks around. Thought you might want some company. I hesitated for only a second. I'd like that, I said, surprised by my own readiness. The fire in Bill's cabin was lively, the chairs pulled close. There was laughter, easy and warm, stories traded without history or old wounds. We weren't family in the usual sense, but in that moment, gathered around the glow, I felt a kinship deeper than obligation, a kind of chosen community, built on kindness and presence rather than expectation. As I made my way back to my own cabin later, I paused on the porch, letting the night wrap around me. I looked up at the stars scattered across the velvet sky, the world blanketed in soft, forgiving snow. I breathed in, slowly, deeply, and felt free, not lost, not abandoned, but truly, astonishingly free. And I realized, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not answer every call, not open every old wound, not explain yourself until your voice is gone. Sometimes you just let the quiet speak, and you let yourself listen for whatever comes next. Letting go isn't surrender. It's forgiving yourself for the things you cannot fix. That line echoed in my head, over and over, as I sat beside the old stone fireplace in the cabin, cradling a mug of spiced tea between my hands. Outside, snow tapped at the window panes, blurring the world beyond into shapes and shadows. The silence felt different now, not hollow, but gentle, almost nurturing. I had spent so many years defining myself by what I could do for others. Now, I was learning to simply let myself be. The morning passed quietly. I found myself journaling, listing everything I thought I'd lost and, more importantly, everything I'd managed to gain. For every tradition I missed, the Winslow tree trimming, the marathon of Christmas movies, the clatter and chaos of family, I wrote down something I'd rediscovered: peace, sleep, the joy of slow mornings, the miracle of not having to apologize for my needs. I named my regrets and let them breathe on the page, letting myself be the family's safety net, not asking for help, always staying silent instead of speaking my truth. Then I made a second list, this one of new strengths, setting boundaries, standing up for myself, saying no, and, perhaps most challenging, accepting the feeling that it was okay to hurt. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Bill stood in the doorway, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "You look deep in thought," he said, passing me one. "Just thinking about everything and nothing," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. He settled into the old rocking chair across from me. We stared at the flames for a while before he finally spoke. "You know, some bridges burn for a reason. Some you just cross and never look back. Either way, you keep moving." I nodded, feeling the weight of those words. For so long, I'd clung to the idea that it was my responsibility to rebuild every bridge, mend every crack, make sure no one ever slipped into the river between us. The reality was, not every gap needs a hero leaping across it. Sometimes, you leave a bridge behind because what's on the other side is finally, mercifully, not yours to carry anymore. Later that afternoon, I met one of the other guests, a woman named Miranda, quiet, sharp-eyed, her hair streaked with gray. We sat on the steps of the porch, bundled in blankets, our breaths curling in the icy air. "My family didn't speak to me for nearly a decade," she told me, her tone matter-of-fact. It hurt. I tried to fix it for years. When I stopped trying, I realized how much I was still living for their approval, even in the silence. Sometimes, you just have to start over with yourself first. We exchanged a look of shared understanding, the kind that requires no further explanation. Inside, as dusk settled over the mountains, I stood by the fire and reached into my bag. There it was, the old invoice, creased and worn from being handled so many times. I stared at it for a long moment, tracing the lines of my own signature, the total scrawled in dark ink, the language of debt and obligation. I thought of all the nights I'd lain awake, imagining conversations, crafting apologies, blaming myself for not being able to fix things, not being able to make everyone happy. With a deep breath, I tore the paper in half. Then in half again and again until all that was left was a small pile of scraps. I tossed them into the flames and watched them curl and blacken, carried away as ash. I wasn't erasing the past. I was letting it rest. That evening, I set the table for one. I lit a single candle, arranging my meal with care: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, the comfort food of holidays past. I took my time, blessing each bite, savoring the peace that settled into my bones. There was no empty chair, no ache of absence. Instead, I felt a quiet fullness, a kind of contentment I'd never known in the whirlwind of old family gatherings. I thought of Joan's words, a line from her last email: "Family is the people who show up for you even if, for now, that person is only you." I let the meaning sink in. I was showing up for myself. I was enough. After dinner, I tidied up and wrote to Joan, telling her about the meal, the torn-up invoice, and the odd, profound relief that came with it. I told her about Miranda and Bill and the strange, gentle community that had found me in this mountain retreat. She wrote back almost immediately. "Harriet, I'm proud of you. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it just means making peace with what is so you can move forward. Light a candle for yourself tonight." So I did. I set a small, white candle in the center of the table and struck a match. The flame leapt up, bright and steady, casting golden light over the simple scene. I watched it for a long time, letting its warmth seep into my skin, my bones, my heart. As I sat there, letting the soft glow fill the cabin, my phone buzzed once. I glanced at the screen, an email from my mother. The subject line was blank. I opened it, heart steady, and read, "I'm sorry. If you want to talk, I'm here." For a long moment, I just sat with it, candlelight flickering, silence all around. I didn't know what I'd do next, or if I'd ever be ready to answer. But in that moment, I didn't feel the familiar guilt, the urge to rush in and rescue. I just felt proud. Quietly, fiercely proud. Tonight, I honored my journey, every loss, every hard-won victory, every scar. Tonight, I was my own company, my own comfort, my own forgiveness. And for the first time, that felt not just enough, but perfect. Home isn't where you have to go, it's where you feel welcome, even if you arrive alone. That truth followed me through the quiet of my last morning in the cabin, settling into my bones like warmth after a long walk in the cold. The snow had stopped, leaving the world outside clean and new, sunlight glinting off the drifts and painting gold across the windowsill. I sat by the little kitchen table with my coffee, breathing in the silence, not ready to let go of the peace I'd found here. My mother's email, the one with its simple apology and tentative invitation, waited in my inbox. For hours, I'd let it sit unopened, afraid of what might come next: confrontation, old patterns, or worse, the ache of hope. But that morning, as the sun climbed higher and I packed my bag for the trip back to Salem, I knew it was time to respond. I kept my reply simple and true. "Mom, I've needed this time away. I've been hurt. I want us to have a better relationship, but I can't go back to being the person who always fixes everything, who never asks for help, who's left out until needed." If we can find a way to meet as equals, with honesty and respect, I want that. But I need you to understand I can't go back to how things were. I hope you can respect that. Love, Harriet. My finger hovered over send for a long time. When I finally pressed it, I felt the faintest tremor of release. No longer a weight, just a ribbon of something softer. Relief, maybe? Or hope? I spent some time cleaning the cabin, folding blankets, washing dishes, opening the windows to let in a breath of new air. Bill stopped by to check in, offering a spare cinnamon roll and a gruff smile. Take care, Harriet. You ever need a quiet place, you know where to find us. I smiled, gratitude swelling quietly inside me. Thank you, Bill. For everything. The drive down the mountain was slow, careful, the winding road edged with icicles and shadows. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from something or racing toward an obligation. I was just moving forward, carrying only what belonged to me now. As Salem's familiar streets came into view, I felt the old tension in my shoulders ease. I stopped at a small cafe on the edge of downtown, a place I'd always meant to try but never had time for. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and vanilla. The windows steamed against the cold. As I waited in line, I heard my name soft and surprised. Harriet, dear. I turned to see Mrs. Crenshaw, wrapped in her winter coat, hands clasped around a mug. Her eyes sparkled as she took me in. I wondered if you'd come back. We missed you at Christmas. I smiled, the words no longer stinging but gentle, like a familiar melody. I needed some time to myself, Mrs. Crenshaw. But it's good to see you. She nodded. We all need that sometimes. My door is open, you know. For tea or just a good long talk. We chatted for a few minutes, swapping small stories, then she pressed her hand over mine before leaving. Remember, Harriet, home isn't just one place. You find it, or sometimes you build it. Sometimes it's where people are waiting for you. Sometimes it's just where you feel whole. I left the cafe with her words tucked in my pocket like a secret. I walked through my old neighborhood, seeing it as if for the first time, not as a daughter returning to the scene of old wounds, but as a woman with choices. I passed the house where I'd grown up, the porch still strung with lights, and felt a flicker of nostalgia but no urge to turn in. I'd carried the weight of that place for so long. Now it was just another chapter in my story, not the whole book. That afternoon, I met Joan for lunch at a cozy restaurant, its windows twinkling with paper stars. She greeted me with a fierce hug and a knowing smile. You did it, Harriet. You made it through. I laughed, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Barely. Barely counts, she said, squeezing my hand. Over soup and sandwiches, Joan invited me to her New Year's Eve gathering. Some old friends, good food, silly hats. No drama, I promise. The thought of returning to my parents' house, to old dynamics and the shadow of old arguments, flickered briefly in my mind. I shook my head. No, I'd love to come. I think it's time to start my own tradition. We made plans, laughter threading easily between us. Later, I wandered through Salem's snow-dusted streets, the sky heavy with the promise of more snow. Each step felt surer than the last. I stopped in the square, listening to the distant sound of church bells, the laughter of children sledding down a nearby hill. The city felt like it belonged to me, and I to it, in a way I'd never allowed before. As dusk fell, I walked home alone. The streetlights cast soft halos on the sidewalks, and the snow crunched beneath my boots. I breathed in the cold, letting it fill me with its sharp, clean promise. I was not the same woman who had left for the mountains, desperate and raw. I was not the tired daughter, nor the reluctant caretaker. I was just Harriet enough, at last, for myself. That night, as I set out my dress for Joan's party and brewed a pot of tea, my phone vibrated. A group message from the family. Happy New Year, whenever you're ready. No guilt, no expectation. just an open door, a gentle welcome. I smiled, heart swelling, not with longing, but with a sense of belonging I had built for myself. As midnight approached, I looked out at the falling snow and felt quietly at home. Not because anyone told me I belonged, but because, finally, I believed it. The new year arrived quietly, not with fireworks, not with noise and midnight kisses, but with a gentle exhale and a softening in my chest. There was no countdown, no crowd. Only the warmth of friendship, the clatter of pans in Joan's small kitchen, and the steady, grateful rhythm of my own breathing. Joan and I started the day with tradition, kneading dough for homemade rolls, slicing vegetables for a simple winter stew. Her apartment was bright with the scent of rosemary and citrus, laughter echoing in the corners as her little group of friends arrived. There was a casual ease in the way everyone pitched in, pouring drinks, setting the table, trading old stories, and gentle teasing. For once, the holiday wasn't a performance or a trial. There was no undercurrent of expectation, no need to prove myself. I could just be. We toasted with cider before dinner, glasses raised to boundaries, new beginnings, and found family. The words felt almost sacred. As the evening deepened, candles flickered on the table and conversation drifted from favorite books to memories of holidays past, some joyful, some bittersweet, all shared without judgment. I listened to Joan's friends, some longtime Salem locals, others newer arrivals like me, each person carrying their own history of heartbreak and hope, yet willing to claim this space as home for tonight. When midnight neared, someone pulled out an old record player. The music crackled and spun, mingling with the sound of distant church bells from downtown. We counted down, not in a rush, but with soft laughter and spontaneous hugs. When the clock struck 12, we all clinked glasses again. To letting go of the things that hurt us and making space for what feels right, Joan said. To the families we choose, and the courage to protect our peace, I added, my voice steadier than I expected. It wasn't grand, but it was everything I needed. A little later, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mrs. Crenshaw. "Happy New Year, Harriet," she chirped, her voice bright even at this hour. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You're braver than you think, you know." My eyes stung with gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Crenshaw. That means more than you know." She chuckled. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to or just a cup of tea, you know where to find me." Russell's message came through next. "Maybe next year, family dinner will be wonderful again. One way or another, you'll be at the head of the table." His words made me smile, a simple, warm hope. As the party wound down, Joan hugged me goodbye at the door. "I hope this is the first of many good years for you, Harriet." I squeezed her hand. "It already is." Outside, Salem was wrapped in silence. Fresh snow muffled the world, the city lights glowing softly through the flakes. I tucked my hands in my pockets and started the slow walk home, letting the cold settle over me and the peace seep in. Each step felt lighter than the last. I stopped beneath a street lamp, the light painting a golden circle on the snow. For the first time, I let myself truly pause, breathing in the new year, letting go of the last lingering regrets, feeling the emptiness in my heart not as a loss, but as space for something kinder. When I reached my apartment building, I noticed something unusual, a small envelope wedged under my door. My name was written on the front in my mother's careful script. I held it in my hands for a moment before stepping inside. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. I made tea, changed into pajamas, and sat on the edge of my bed, the letter resting in my lap. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I gazed out the window at the city, the familiar, snow-dusted rooftops, the glow of porch lights, the hush that settles when a town is between years, waiting for what's next. In the past, I would have filled this quiet with worry. I would have agonized over every word of the letter, every implication, every possibility of disappointment or demand. But tonight, I was content to simply hold it, acknowledging the connection, the complexity, the truth that home is not always the place you leave, but sometimes the place you create for yourself. Before I slipped into sleep, I whispered a silent wish for peace, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever felt out of place at their own table, everyone searching for belonging and finding it, at last, within themselves. The new year had come in quietly, but in that quiet, I felt braver, lighter, and more at home than ever before. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing what you carry into the future. That phrase stayed with me as I stared at my mother's letter, still unopened, sitting on the kitchen table under the pale winter morning light. In years past, a letter from her would have filled me with a heady mix of hope and dread, but this time, I felt grounded. I'd changed. I'd learned that I could open doors for others, but only if I first kept the door to myself unlocked. I finally broke the seal, unfolding the pages with care. My mother's handwriting was as familiar as ever, looping and steady. Her words were tentative, apologetic. There was no grand confession, no perfect explanation for the hurt. Instead, she wrote, "I wish I'd been braver. I wish I'd seen how much you were holding up for all of us. I'm sorry I let you carry so much alone. I can't change what happened, but I want to try to do better. If you want, maybe we can start small, just coffee, nothing more." She signed it, simply, "Love, Mom." I read it twice, letting each line settle. It wasn't everything I might have wanted, but it was real. Honest in its incompleteness. That's what healing really looks like, I realized, not a sudden, magical transformation, but a willingness to meet each other in a new space, even if it's uncomfortable. I wrote back, "Coffee sounds good. But let's leave the past where it is, no talk of money, no blame. Just today." We agreed to meet at a little cafe near the river, a place with windows that overlooked the icy water and tables always crowded with locals escaping the cold. The walk there was short, but my heart beat fast with anticipation. I bundled up, scarf tucked under my chin, and let the cold air clear my head. As I reached the corner, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Crenshaw on her way out of the bakery, her arms full of fresh loaves. She paused as we crossed paths, eyes warm and knowing. "Sometimes families grow best when you let the light in, dear," she said, giving my hand a gentle squeeze before continuing down the block. Inside the cafe, my family waited at a small table near the window. My mother and father looked older, maybe a bit more fragile, but their smiles were genuine. Lainey was there too, fidgeting with her napkin, a nervous spark in her eyes. For a moment, none of us spoke. I set my bag down, shrugged out of my coat, and sat. The waitress arrived with steaming mugs of coffee and pastries dusted with sugar. The table felt oddly intimate, the usual rush of obligation or old wounds absent for once. It was my father who broke the silence, remembering the time we'd all built a gingerbread house together, how the roof collapsed and we'd eaten the evidence. Laughter came, hesitant but real, the kind that cleans out old cobwebs and makes space for something new. Lainey offered up her own story of borrowing my sweaters in high school, never daring to admit it. We swapped memories, sometimes bittersweet, sometimes funny. There were moments of quiet when the conversation faltered, but no one tried to fill the space with apologies or demands. Eventually, my mother looked at me and said, softly, "I know things will never be exactly the same. But I'm grateful you're here, even just for today." I nodded. "I'm glad too. But I need you all to know I can't go back to how things were. I'll be part of the family, but not at the expense of myself. No more carrying it all alone. That's my boundary." They listened. Not with perfect understanding, but with something like respect. I felt a softening in my chest, acceptance, not of the past, but of what might be possible now. When it was time to leave, I stood and reached for my coat. My family rose as well, awkward but sincere. Lainey hesitated, then handed me a folded slip of paper. "I wrote you something. Just read it later, okay?" On the sidewalk, I turned to see Mrs. Crenshaw across the street, catching my eye. She nodded, smiling knowingly, and called out, "Let the light in, Harriet. Let it grow." Walking along the river, I opened Lainey's note. Her handwriting was hurried, ink blotted in places. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. I didn't get it before, but I see it now. I hope someday I can be as brave as you." I stopped, letting the words settle. The river flowed quietly beside me, the city moving at its usual, gentle pace. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to be everything for everyone, afraid that if I ever stopped, the family would fall apart. Now I realized I was allowed to let others pick up the pieces too. I was allowed to ask for help, to step away, to choose what I carried and what I put down. As I walked back through Salem's snowy streets, I felt a new kind of warmth. The reconciliation wasn't total or tidy, but it was real and it was mine. I'd open the door, not just to my family, but to myself. I would carry forward only what made me stronger, leaving behind what weighed me down. Forgiveness, I understood now, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about walking bravely into the future, bringing only what served me and leaving the rest behind. And for the first time, I believed I could do just that. Sometimes reunion means sitting at the same table, and sometimes it means setting a new one altogether. As the soft winter sunlight filtered through the windows of my childhood home, I found myself standing at the threshold of the dining room, memories flooding in. I'd walked this hallway 1,000 times, holidays, birthdays, tense weeknights, and perfect Sunday dinners where smiles sometimes felt stretched thin. Today, the house smelled of cinnamon and roast chicken. The table was set simply, no fuss, no over-the-top centerpiece. Just us, just now. My mother, Marjorie, was bustling between the kitchen and the dining room, but she wasn't barking orders or micromanaging every detail. She caught my eye and offered a tentative smile, one that said, "I'm trying." My father, Everett, fiddled with the old radio on the sideboard, searching for jazz, the static somehow comforting in its imperfection. Lainey arrived last, hands shoved in her pockets, her voice quiet as she greeted me. I squeezed her hand under the table in silent acknowledgement. We began the meal awkwardly, everyone unsure of the new rules. Conversation started with weather and news of the town, but gradually I nudged things forward, steering us away from the old scripts. "What's something new you've learned about yourself this year?" I asked, surprising myself with the boldness. Everett looked up, his brow furrowed, then he chuckled. I remembered how much I loved sledding as a kid. "I haven't done it in years. Maybe next winter I'll try again," he said, his eyes glinting with gentle mischief. Lainey's voice trembled a little when she spoke. "I'm sorry, Harriet, for not seeing you before. I was caught up in my own mess, and I think I expected you to always be the strong one." I reached for her hand, squeezing it. "We all get lost sometimes. Thank you for saying that." Marjorie set down a dish of roasted vegetables and cleared her throat. "I'm learning too. I thought if I just kept pushing through, everything would hold together. But that's not how it works. I know I have a lot to learn. And I want to learn." There was no grand confession, just small truths shared across the table, moments of vulnerability that had been missing from so many perfect dinners in the past. Midway through dessert, the doorbell rang, and Russell appeared, cheeks flushed from the cold, grinning as he brought his own special twist, a homemade pie. "Can't have dessert without a little chaos," he joked, breaking whatever tension was left. A few minutes later, Mrs. Crenshaw arrived as well, balancing a cake tin and a snow-dusted scarf. She pressed a kiss to my cheek. "Second chances are sweet, dear," she said, settling herself at the table as if she'd always belonged. The meal shifted into laughter, shared stories, and even comfortable silences. Nobody asked me to carve the roast, mediate an argument, or pay a bill. I wasn't the fixer or the silent backbone. I was just Harriet, simply present. For the first time, I felt like I belonged at the table, not because I'd earned it or solved everyone's problems, but because I was wanted. Russell recounted tales of his disastrous holiday baking attempts, making us all laugh so hard we cried. Everett shared an old story about sneaking out as a boy to see the Christmas lights with his brother, another sliver of the family history I'd never heard. Even Lainey piped up with a joke, the old rivalry between us softened by this new truce. As we finished the meal, Marjorie raised her mug of coffee. "To all the tables we've shared and to the ones we still have to build together," she said, her voice warm and trembling. I smiled, heartful, feeling a peace that I'd thought might never come. Nobody looked to me for a solution or to carry the weight of the evening. We were just a family, flawed and fragile and slowly healing. After dinner, as everyone lingered over pie and tea, I slipped away to the den and pulled out my journal. By the window, I wrote in the soft light, "The la du roi, toi du roi." I repeated it, letting the words sink in. For so long, I'd measured myself against an invisible standard, always striving, always trying to fix, always needing to be needed. But tonight, the only thing I needed was this: to be here, to be seen, to be enough, exactly as I am. Later, I bundled up and walked home through the quiet Salem streets. The snow fell in soft curtains, muffling the world, making everything glow. I watched my breath cloud in the cold, each step settling me more firmly into my own life. Mrs. Crenshaw's words echoed in my mind: second chances, new beginnings, sweetness found even after the hardest winter. I thought about all the old tables I'd set, and all the new ones I might build, not just for my family, but for myself. That night, as I climbed into bed, I felt a quiet gratitude. The world outside was cold and white, but my heart was finally warm. For the first time, reunion didn't mean returning to what was broken. It meant honoring what I'd built within myself and with the people who chose to meet me where I am. The light on Christmas morning in my apartment was softer than I remembered, almost golden as it spilled across the kitchen floor and lit up the windowsill where I'd lined up a collection of holiday cards. Most were from old friends, a couple from neighbors, one with only my own handwriting. "Merry Christmas anyway," the card I sent to myself last year, a talisman of quiet defiance. This year, there was no rushing, no schedules, no anxious anticipation. I let the silence settle, a companion rather than an enemy, and put on the kettle. The scent of cinnamon and orange peel filled my little kitchen as I stirred oatmeal on the stove, humming along to the radio classic carols, the kind that always made the world feel smaller and softer. From my window, I could see the town waking up. The bakery on the corner was already busy, lines out the door, laughter spilling into the cold air. I saw Mrs. Crenshaw making her way down the sidewalk, carrying her trademark basket. For a moment, I imagined my younger self, watching scenes like this with longing, wishing to be invited, to belong. But I belong now, I realized. Here. In this room, in this life I've made for myself. Mid-morning, my phone rang. It was Joan, her voice cheerful as ever, the sound of a fire crackling in the background on her end. "Merry Christmas, friend. Can you believe we made it through the weirdest year yet?" I laughed, and we traded stories, burnt cookies, old movies, memories of quiet holidays, dreams for the new year. "We survived," Joan said. "That's worth celebrating. I hope you're treating yourself to something sweet." "I am," I assured her. "Today is all about little joys." I'll save you a seat for New Year's, she added, warmth in every syllable. After we hung up, I took a slow walk around the block. The snow crunched beneath my boots, and the city seemed gentler somehow, the holiday bustle muted but content. I stopped at the animal shelter on the edge of downtown and dropped off a small donation, something I'd promised myself, a way to give back not out of obligation, but gratitude. When I returned, Mrs. Crenshaw was waiting at my door, cheeks rosy from the cold, arms full of crisp cinnamon waffles wrapped in a festive towel. These are for you, dear. You deserve a sweet ending to the year. She stepped inside for tea, and we talked quietly, no rush, just two women grateful for each other's company. Sometimes the greatest gift is finding peace in your own company, she said, patting my hand before she left. In the early afternoon, I called my mother. No drama, no expectation. Just her voice, softer than it used to be, and mine, steadier. Merry Christmas, Harriet. Merry Christmas, Mom. We spoke of little things, recipes, the weather, how the world keeps turning. We didn't dwell on the past or the cracks in our story. We simply met each other in the present, two women doing their best. Afterward, I poured myself a mug of cocoa, curling up by the window with a thick blanket. The world outside had faded into that blue-gray twilight that comes before snow. I held the Merry Christmas Anyway card in my hands, running my fingers over the words, and felt a full-hearted quiet settle over me. Maybe family isn't always the people who raised you, or the ones whose approval you chase. Sometimes, it's the people who show up, neighbors, friends, yourself on the toughest days. Sometimes, it's the home you build, the table you set for yourself, the boundaries you defend with kindness. This year, I'd learned to let go of bitterness, of guilt, of the need to be needed. I'd found forgiveness, not because anyone earned it, but because it set me free. I'd given myself permission to rest, to celebrate quietly, to embrace the ordinary joys, the taste of cinnamon, the warmth of lamplight, the comfort of silence well-earned. As snow began to fall, thick and gentle outside my window, I felt only gratitude. For the chance to begin again. For the courage to choose peace. For a Christmas, at last, that belonged to me. And as the evening closed in, I whispered to the quiet room, Merry Christmas, anyway. The scent of cinnamon lingered. The town outside glowed in soft lights. The silence wasn't empty at all. It was full, peaceful, and entirely my own. My name is Harriet, and if you have been with me through the 16 chapters of this journey, you have probably also had thoughts about family, tolerance, and self-worth amidst life's challenges. Looking back, what has haunted and touched me the most is not the loss or hurt, but the growth after each time I dared to set boundaries for myself and was brave enough to forgive not only others, but myself. Family, as I have experienced, is sometimes imperfect, can hurt us, but is also the place that teaches us the greatest lessons about compassion, resilience, and how to find inner peace. I used to feel lost, used to think I didn't belong anywhere, but it turns out the journey to find acceptance is the journey back to myself, learning to love and respect myself first. What about you? Have you ever felt lonely even when surrounded by the people you love the most? Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to someone else and peace for yourself? Share your thoughts, stories, or just say hello in the comments. If this story brings back a fond memory, leave comment number 1, or let me know where in the country you're listening from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you find meaning in simple stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you can listen to more journeys of humanity, forgiveness, and new hope every week. Thank you for your patience and empathy throughout this long journey. Hopefully, somewhere along the way, you will find a true home, whether it's big or small, full of people or just yourself. I wish you strength, happiness, and peace on your own path.